Hey everyone! Astrophotography is probably one of the most difficult hobbies to attempt and sustain. Now that's not to throw shade at other hobbies, they're difficult in their own right. But I just think that this hobby, it puts you in an environment where you have the least amount of control. Sure, you can control your equipment, you can control your mount, your camera, your telescope. But beyond that, you have little to no control to your views, like your obstructions. You have no control about the night sky condition. You have no control over what's available to you during any particular time of the year. You certainly don't have control over the weather, and you don't have control over the moon. And all of that impacts your final image. And quite honestly, everything that I just mentioned sort of amplify the difficulties of the galaxy season. I've come across many social media posts of people asking, well, it's the galaxy season, what else are you guys imaging? And I hope that in this video I can go over why galaxies are pretty difficult and what are some ways to sort of plan around it. So let's get started. Why am I always hungry when I'm filming myself? All right, so let's start by talking about why we call this time of the year the galaxy season. And there are a couple of reasons, but the main reason is because the Earth has moved into a position where our own local galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is no longer blocking the views to other galaxies from where we are. And so between March and June, we have access to a bunch of galaxies that are otherwise not available to us for the rest of the year. And this is also the time, sort of the transition between your winter nebulae to your summer and fall nebulae. And between March and June, there's really nothing else to image during this time frame other than galaxies. There's not many nebulae that are available to us. And if they are, you're either catching the tail end of the winter, or you're staying up super late and you're starting your session at like 4 a.m. to catch the beginning of the summer nebulae. So that is why between March and June, astronomers, we call this the galaxy season, or as I like to call it, what else am I going to image? So what are some of the reasons as to why galaxies are pretty difficult, at least in my opinion? And now this list is a personal list, is not a definitive list. I'm sure there are probably other reasons as to why galaxies are difficult, but these are my reasons as to why galaxies are difficult. It will have nothing to do with the weather, but instead, it's down to the core nature of these galaxies and how our night sky conditions sort of impacts the way that we image galaxies. And I can come up with two primary reasons, and I'll go into more details about what they are. But I think the primary reason why galaxies are difficult is, number one, they're super tiny. They are really, really, really tiny. And number two, they're broadband targets. And they're consistent with any other broadband object that you try to image as far as difficulty is concerned. So with that being said, let's go into a little bit more details. When photographing something super tiny in the night sky, you need something with a lot of focal length, a lot of reach. And unfortunately, this is sort of the part of astrophotography where it kind of sucks to talk about, because this is where money talks. And there is almost no substitution for optical reach. What I have here is the Astro-Tech AT115 EDT, and at its focal length, 805 millimeters, it's nowhere near enough to capture the details of many of the galaxies. As a matter of fact, nothing in my library has enough reach to faithfully capture galaxies and all of this detail. And because of that, I personally think you need to have at least 1,000 millimeters of focal length to do galaxies justice. But of course, when you start to have optical instruments with that kind of reach, they obviously are they're going to increase in size and weight. And then you get into the question of, can my mount handle it? This is the Skywatcher HEQ5 that I've been using for a long time, and this is about as big of a telescope as I'm willing to put on my mount and still have this to be accurate. So if you're going to go for something with a focal length of about 1,000 millimeters and more, you need a bigger mount than this. And with a bigger mount, of course, it's gonna be more, you're gonna have to throw more money into it. And that's why I said this is the part of astrophotography where it just kind of sucks, because there's no cure other than throw more money into the hobby. However, there are ways that you can sort of go around this lack of optical reach. So if you happen to have a camera sensor that is smaller than a typical sensor, maybe something that's smaller than APS-C, then it's going to help you a little bit, because that smaller sensor is going to help you crop in to your object and effectively sort of artificially zoom in on top of whatever optical zoom that you have. I don't remember the crop factor off the top of my head for something like a micro four thirds or maybe a 1-inch sensor, but generally speaking, the smaller camera sensor that you use, the more zoomed in you're going to be, because you're effectively cropping into your picture. But me, I have an APS-C sensor, and I also have a full frame sensor. More on that in another video. But because of my sensor choices being just APS-C size and full frame, my images of galaxies are going to be super tiny. But yeah, that's really one of the main reasons why galaxies are so challenging, because they're just really small and you need a lot of reach for that. And if you're wondering why I have this sort of wrapped in towel, is because it is super windy in San Francisco. And I've been imaging for the past couple of nights because it's been clear, so I don't want to have to repolar align and all that stuff. So that's why I just cover it up with a towel and wrapped it up so I don't get dust on my telescope. Mater can take the dust. He'll be fine. Galaxies are broadband targets, and that's another major reason why they're so difficult to image. Unlike emission nebulae, where they emit very specific wavelength of hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, and sulfur 2, and various other very specific wavelengths, with those targets, we can use very, very harsh narrowband filter to select specifically for those wavelengths, and then we can also use those filter to essentially block out the entire visible light spectrum. And depending on how narrow your narrowband filter is, you can essentially not worry about light pollution. However, galaxies, unlike emission nebulae, are essentially just a collection of starlight within that galaxy. That is why when we look at pictures of galaxies, they look primarily blue because of natural starlight. And because of that, we cannot use a narrowband filter. So because we can't use narrowband filter, we still have to somehow deal with the light pollution, right? So you can do maybe one of three things. Number one, just accept the fact that you're gonna have to deal with light pollution. Number two, you can use one of those broadband light pollution filter, such as the Optilong L Pro that I've been using, but they honestly can't do a very good job at blocking out light pollution, because if they do too good of a job, then they essentially become narrowband filter and they become useless against broadband targets. Or number three, which is the best option but may not be the most practical, and that is to take your equipment and get out of an urban area, go to a truly dark site. So all I'm trying to say is, when you're imaging galaxies, you always have to factor in light pollution. Another reason why, and that's related to broadband imaging, and the reason why galaxies are difficult, is because of the status of the moon. Moonlight will always wash out your broadband targets. Actually, moonlight will essentially wash out any of the signal coming from your target. But hydrogen alpha, they're a little bit more immune to it, so you can still image hydrogen alpha during the full moon, but you really can't do that when it comes to broadband targets. And so therefore, if you factor in how long the galaxy season is, about 3 months, and then you also factor in the fact that the moon sort of interferes with astronomy for about 2 weeks out of the month. So when you think about it, you really don't have a whole lot of time during the galaxy season to image galaxies. You really only have, let's see, 3 months, and then you only get 2 weeks where the moon doesn't interfere with you. So you have 6 weeks to image all of the galaxies in the night sky. And we haven't even talked about your local weather and how that's going to affect you. So combine that with the fact that galaxies are super tiny, and they're tiny little broadband objects. If you feel like you've been getting your butt kicked by a galaxy, then I'm here to tell you that you're not alone. It's kicking my butt too. So I'm gonna take a moment to talk about my plans for the night. Now, I've narrowed it down to either the Whirlpool galaxy or the Sunflower galaxy. Both of those targets are still kind of behind obstructions, and I can't start yet. By the way, it's about 10 p.m. right now, so I think I have to wait another hour or two before I can begin imaging. But I just want to help sort of control your expectation to the final image, because as I mentioned, this telescope, as awesome as it is, the Astro-Tech AT115 EDT, I don't think it's got enough reach to really do galaxies justice. It gets close, but no, not quite. So my plan for the final image, if I can even capture anything tonight, is I'm gonna frame it down the middle with my galaxy in the middle, and my only option is to crop way in post-processing, and that's going to be a problem because the closer I zoom in, the closer I crop in, the more apparent the noise is going to be. So I don't think I'm going to have a great image to show for by the end of the night. But I don't have any other options if I want to image galaxies with the equipment that I have. And yeah, it's crazy. This is already a telescope with 805 millimeters of focal length, and galaxies are still just tiny little object. And I'm taking advantage of tonight because, as I mentioned earlier, you know, imaging broadband targets, you gotta do it on a night when there's no moon. And tonight is actually, this entire weekend is going to be great to image galaxies because the moon isn't out. I just need to make sure that my skies are going to be clear. So, having said all that, I'm going to start to set up, and skies are starting to get clear. So I think tonight is going to work out. But again, don't expect a don't expect a great image. I have very, very low expectations when it comes to galaxy imaging. So yeah, I'll chat back with you in a little bit. All right, so let's try this again. I've decided that for tonight I'm going to go with the sunflower galaxy because of the way that my my condo building is sort of blocking the view. I'm going to have a little bit more time with the sunflower galaxy, so I'm going to go with that. So and my plan is to just take a take 2 minutes exposure for as many exposures as I can, and hopefully I will have I'll have a decent image for you guys at the end of the video. Now, once again, I don't think, by the way, I don't know if you guys can hear it. You can hear you can hear me talking over my mouth, and I'm not speaking too loudly right now because it is almost 1 a.m. and well, I have neighbors, so can't be speaking that loud. But I hope that I'm able to, at the very least, put together a decent image. But you have to remember that I'm going to be cropping in so much that you guys are going to see a lot of noise, a lot of imperfections. But it's I got to do what I got to do what I can to get a decent image of a galaxy. And you know, this is the I don't have anything else that's that will give you more focal length than the Astro-Tech AT115 EDT. So this is the best that I can do at the moment, and I hope that you guys have found this video to be useful, and hopefully I was able to provide some sort of guidance for you guys moving forward. I think, you know, you still have at least one more month of the Galaxy season. So, you know, if you have the time and you have the equipment, or even if you're like me, you don't have sufficient equipment, just go out here, go out to your backyard or wherever. As long as you have access to the night sky, give it a shot. Even if it's just a tiny, tiny little image, I think it'll be worth it. And with that being said, I wish you all good health, clear skies, and I'll look forward to putting another video out pretty soon. Anyways, I'll see you guys. Take care. Bye.